Orale, ya sabes. It's your host, Gabe Morales. I want to make a quick correction on a picture I posted under the bees. When I first looked at it, I thought maybe Nidal Baca had blasted new tattoos on his throat and above his eye, as the picture posted here was from 2003 at Pelican Bay. I should have checked with my contacts at the Bay. I have contacts at most of the major pintas in California as well as the BOP. So my bad on that one. As I stated before, I try very hard to get it right, but almost every episode, I'm probably going to make one mistake. It seems to me like some of you guys are real nitpickers. Anyways, for those of you who have given me constructive criticism in a respectful way, as you see, I usually will reply and give you an answer. Now, it could be that we just have a difference of opinion, but as I said before, everybody I've talked about here is I have documentation on from either CDC, including SSU, BOP, including SIS, county jail reports, who sometimes differ from the state and feds, and even some city police gang units when I converse with officers that I believe really know their stuff. I also talk to former gang members in some of these cliques, and even on the sly, sometimes active ones. So moving on. Continue our Mexican Mafia countdown of members over the past 60 years, today beginning with the last name of C as in Charlie. The first one that I have is Adrian Joker Cabral, who is out of Whittier. He had a T number and paroled in 2005. I show he is not currently in custody, and I don't know his current whereabouts. Anthony Chapo Cabral was from Redlands. He was one of two brothers in La M from that town. Chapo had a C number and then later came back with a T number. I believe he was Mexican Mafia in the 1980s, did some time at Pelican Bay as well as I believe at Tehachapi and Centinela, and is currently housed at Folsom State Prison. He was involved with taxation out in the Inland Empire area with Dennis Woody Ortiz from the Compton Setentas. His brother, Gilbert Gibby Cabral, also had a C number and was also made sometime in the 1980s. I show he did some time at Pelican Bay as well as Centinela in recent years and presently housed in Corcoran. Robert Nego Cabral was the uncle to Gilbert and Anthony. He was from Colton and also went by Frank Nettie. He had a B number, was Mexican Mafia in the early 70s, and was involved in the death of Nuestra Familia members shortly after the death of MA icon Cheyenne Cadena. I showed that Nego died in 2006 of cancer. Gilbert Thumper Cabrera had an E number, and I understand also had ties to Washington State. Stephen Wolfie Cabrera had a B number, and then later came back with a D number when he caught a murder case. He is presently housed at New Folsom Prison. Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena was from Bakersfield, but also was close to the Vatos from Primera Flats. He had an A56586 number and was born in 1943. He caught a murder case as a very young man in Bakersfield in 1958 and then was sent to CDC as a very young man where he had to prove himself. It is said that he committed a murder in 1962 at San Quentin prison by a black inmate who tried to sex play him. Cheyenne was very smart and also considered to be a revolutionary. He actually did not want the Nuestra Familia and MA to war, but in the same token, he tried to take his cousin out, who was the number one guy in the Nuestra Familia at that time, a guy named Gonzalo Chalo Hernandez, who was also from Bakersfield. In fact, it was during the assassination attempt on Chalo that Cheyenne was arrested by parole agent Tony Casas, who I've spoken to at length about the early Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia members. Now, there's a lot of guys who didn't like Tony because later on he became a defense attorney for some of these guys and helped get a lot of them off. So he was both respected by investigators and hated by others. Tony is no longer with us. Of course, Cheyenne Cadena's pleas for peace with the Nuestra Familia fell on deaf ears, and they ended up killing him on December 15th, 1972 at Chino's Palm Hall. I've talked about Shy in previous episodes, but if you remember in the movie American Me, he was the character played by Olmos. The only thing was he wasn't killed by his own. He was killed by the other side, the Nuestra Familia. Arthur Capone Calderon was from Tokerstown, and he had an E number. Now, I knew him when he was just a camarada, but I believe he achieved MA status right around the time I left. He ended up getting shipped out to Oregon DOC, where he is very active and considered a major shot caller for the Sureños there. Robert Miami, aka Beto Calderon, was from Coachella. He had a C number and was Mexican Mafia in the late 1980s. I show he paroled in 2011, and I lost track of him after that. Gabriel Campos was from Pomona 12th Street. Pomona 12th Street has a lot of guys. I'll talk about them later when I talk about Mike Letterman, who's considered the number one guy in La M for P12 currently. Frank Chato Cantano was from Montclair, and he had a C number. He was born in 1963 and was MA sometime in the late 80s through early 90s. His brother, Ramon Happy Cantano, was also from Montclair and born in 1959. Basically, the same thing happened with him in the 1980s, and I currently show is not in custody. Leonard Cobra Capla was from La Puente, and I show he was MA in the mid-1970s and was once housed at the California Medical Facility at Vacaville. Daniel Termite Carbajal was from Rancho San Pedro. He was close to Robot Salas in the federal system. There was also Joseph Chapulín Carvajal, who was also from Rancho San Pedro. I believe he was the brother of Daniel. Chapulín also did time in the Arizona system, where there's some old Mexican Mafia there, in particular, one of the Morenos. Chapulín had a B number and also was sent to the feds and close to several Mexican Mafia members, as seen here. He did time at Lompoc with the fellas as well as Marion and was released in July 2005, whereby I understand he got into a domestic violence love triangle and was killed. Others say that that was just the excuse used, that he actually was assassinated by La M. It's one of those stories where the truth never may be told. Let me know what you've heard. Alfonso Carrillo Barron was from Los. I show he had an early B number and then came back under a K number, where he was involved in meth sales. Henry Indio Carlos was another one of those individuals. I had the violence control unit at New Folsom 85. Indio was from El Sereno and had a C number, was very involved in Mexican Mafia politics, ended up hitting Cuate Grajeda in the gang module at the LA County Jail, and has been running Centinela State Prison for the past several years, where he has several crews of camaradas who are loyal to him. Benjamin Benny Carranza was from Rivas. He had an H number, so was MA in the 1990s, and I'm unsure about his current whereabouts. George Wino Carrasco had a D number when he caught an assault with a deadly weapon case, and I believe he was made sometime in the 1990s. I am unsure about his current status. Victor Mico Carrasco was from San Diego Shelltown. He had a D number and was yet another one of those MA hitman that I had at the Violence Control Unit of New Folsom in the early 90s. I remember him being tall, but everybody told me he was very dangerous. He was housed in Corcoran in 2012, and I lost track of him after that. George Loco Carrillo was from Santa Bruta, and he had an E number. He was MA by at least 2004, and I show that he was housed at Salinas Valley State Prison in the late 1990s. I believe that's shortly after it opened. Raymond Chino Casares was from Norwalk, and I show had a D number. He was MA at Pelican Bay by 2012 and has been housed for almost the last decade at Centinela State Prison. David Prieto Castaneda was from San Bernardino County. He had a C number and operated as just a camarada, but returned in 1998 with a K number, where evidently he put in enough work to be considered a canal or a pili. I show he was at Corcoran State Prison in 2016, then later on moved to Kern Valley State Prison, where he's been housed the last few years. Frank Big Sluggo Castaneda was from El Hoyo Maravilla. He was one of the early MA members in the 1960s and sent to the feds in the 1980s. He was charged with the murder of an individual named Don Smith on July 21st, 1983 at Marion, and was close to Alfie Sosa. He ended up paroling and dropping out. I believe he joined Victory Outreach, and I believe is now deceased. Correct me if I'm wrong. Gabriel Little Sluggo Castaneda was his brother, and he was also from El Hoyo Maravilla and involved in some murders, and also one involving the Texas Syndicate later on. Little Sluggo had a B number of 15564 and was also an early MA member, being only a couple years younger than his brother Big Sluggo. I show he was involved in the murder of Jim Tremblay at San Quentin Prison in November 1968. He also was housed at Folsom Prison in 1975, and I understand ended up paroling after that and overdosing in September 1975 at a Mexican Mafia member's house. Arturo Tablas Castellanos is from Florencia, which is the second biggest sureño gang in LA after 18th Street. Tablas had an early C number and was made Mexican Mafia sometime in the early 1980s, was housed at Folsom Prison, and then later on moved to Pelican Bay SHU, where he ruled for many years and was considered to be one of the top guys in the MA. He was indicted on a RICO case in August 2013, but I believe stayed in CDC custody. I do not show a BOP number for him. Tablas was heavily involved in the end of hostilities agreement with the Nuestra Familia, Aryan Brotherhood, and Black Guerrilla family. And there are some individuals who are against that and say that Tablas made a lot of money off that deal. But that might be just pure jealousy on their part. I show Tablas is still held at Pelican Bay. His brother, Braulio Babo Castellanos, was also from Florencia and was a couple years older than Tablas. A lot of people say that while Babo was quieter, he actually had the juice. Babo was made MA in the 1980s, I believe, at San Quentin, and then held at Pelican Bay. He ordered a hit on Thomas Wainograjeda and was also indicted in the August 2013 RICO case, but I don't think he went to the BOP either. Babo was instrumental in ending the war between the East Coast Crips and Florencia 13, a war that killed dozens of people on both sides. Shortly before he was released in May 2023, he reflected on his criminal career and felt glad that at least he did one major good thing. He died in June 2023. I hate to cut it off there, but that's all the time I have for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode so far. We're barely into the ABCs. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.